Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Into the Depths, a series in which we will dive into the fascinating history of the Royal Netherlands Navy from 1914 till 1945. In this episode, we will talk about the Toetoep uniform. Likely you are familiar with the white Toetoep uniform, but did you know there was also a khaki and dark blue version? At the end of this video, you will know all about it. First, some background information. White clothing was first introduced by the English. In 1885, the Royal Netherlands Navy also wanted white clothing because it was more suitable to wear between the tropics. However, it was not until the turn of the century that the white uniform was introduced. Among the personnel of the Netherlands Navy, this uniform was known as the Toetoep uniform. The Malay term Toetoep refers to the specific character of the jacket, the standing collar. Thanks to this high-necked collar, there was no need to wear a shirt or tie, because you wouldn't see them anyway. So, underneath the uniform often only a sleeveless shirt was worn. This uniform was preferably ordered from the tailor in the wearer's own size, usually by the dozen. This number is not surprising when you consider that people were used to change into a clean suit 2 to 3 times a day because of the warm climate. The uniform was specially made for good washability. All edges, hems and seams were single or double stitched, so that the fabric would not roll or fray when it was washed. At the time, the Royal Netherlands Navy was surely not the only branch who wore this kind of uniform. For example, planters, civil servants, private entrepreneurs and high school students wore a similar costume. So, what does the uniform exactly look like? The Toetoep uniform is made of cotton drill or Russian linen. On both hips there is a pocket without a flap. On the left chest there is a small pocket and behind it there is a pocket for a pocket watch. Although pocket watches are rarely seen worn in photographs after the 1920s. The uniform is closed with a row of 7 anchor buttons and with 2 hooks that close the collar. Around 1910, the hooks are replaced with cuffs. The ranks are worn on the shoulder and are secured to the uniform by a system of 3 hooks. The ranks must be worn so that the braid runs from back to front. If an officer wore this the wrong way around, he sails backwards, as the expression goes. If another person makes the offender aware of this, the officer has to pay this person a drink. On the inside of the uniform, the 7 anchor buttons are secured with a ring. This way the buttons and ranks can easily be removed from the uniform. This was necessary because the uniform had to be washed often due to the tropical climate. There are at least 8 versions of the Toetoep known to us that were used by the Royal Netherlands Navy. We will discuss them one by one. First of all, there is the white Toetoep, worn by non-commissioned officers, NCOs, midshipmen and officers of the Fleet and Naval Air Service. Officers of the Marine Corps wore this uniform as well. The white Toetoep was the standard uniform worn every day. Some of the men wore the miniature version of their medals in one of the upper buttonholes or a ribbon bar on the chest. NCOs and officers of the Naval Air Service wore the metal version of their wings above the chest pocket. Military attachés and adjutants wore the aiguillettes. Besides that the uniform was worn on a daily basis, it also functioned for ceremonial purposes. In this case, it was worn with white gloves, a saber, and the full-scale medals on the chest. In general, the jacket was worn with white trousers, black or white shoes, and the cap with a white cap cover. But there are some exceptions to this. For example, in some cases, also khaki trousers were worn, as we can see here. As for the headwear, when carrying out dirty work in certain areas below deck, such as the engine room and boiler room, it was permitted to wear the dark blue cap with the Toetoep uniform. And also a white tropical pith helmet can be seen worn, but again, these are exceptions. Interestingly, this uniform is still worn today by the Royal Netherlands Navy as a ceremonial uniform, although with a few updates. The ranks are now slip-on epaulets and the pocket for the pocket watch has disappeared. The Netherlands Marines wore their own version of the white toetoep, up to the rank of non-commissioned officer. This version has 2 hip and chest pockets with a flap. Characteristic of the Marines uniform is the red piping on the dark blue shoulder boards with an anchor. Detachable ranks are worn on the collar. Headwear was the dark blue cap with red piping. In 1938, the white cover for the cap was introduced. The uniform could also be combined with a bamboo hat. The Marines toetoep was worn for ceremonial occasions, parades, on leave, and on guard duty. On parades or when on guard, the Mannlicher M95 rifle was carried, along with the leather equipment. The white uniform also had disadvantages, namely that stains were clearly visible. That is why a dark blue and khaki version were also introduced, for the cases when work had to be done that could get one dirty. Both were worn by the Fleet and Naval Air Service, not by the Marine Corps as far as we know. Medals or wings were not worn on these working toetoeps. The khaki toetoep was worn by NCOs and officers. Headwear was the white cap for the most part, but the bamboo hat and the tropical pith helmet can also be spotted. There were 2 versions of the khaki toetoep. The first version was exactly the same as the white toetoep. It is interesting to point out that the officers of the Naval Air Service had their ranks directly sewn on. This was probably done to prevent the ranks from becoming loose when flying in an open cockpit. Mid-1936, the second version of the khaki toetoep was introduced. The standing collar was modified into a turn-down collar with detachable ranks. The same type of ranks can be seen worn on the officer's boat cloak. Here we see the second version of the khaki toetoep being worn by 2 officers on board the submarine K-14 in 1938. This officer is wearing a different type of rank, made from a hard material. The dark blue toetoep was worn by NCOs only. The ranks are worn on the collar, except for the warrant officer who wears his ranks as epaulets on the shoulder. There are at least 4 versions of the dark blue toetoep. Model 1 is exactly the same as the white toetoep and the most commonly seen. Model 2 has a turn-down collar. This was probably introduced around the same time as the khaki toetoep with a turn-down collar, so in the mid-1930s. Model 3 has flat buttons instead of navy anchor buttons. This we can see being worn in workplaces both in the Dutch East Indies as in the Netherlands in the late 1910s and early 1920s. Model 4 has the pockets directly sewn on the uniform and lacks the pocket for the pocket watch. It's not always clear why a type of toetoep was worn for a certain occasion. For example, in this picture, taken on a Dutch submarine in 1939, 3 types of toetoep are worn. On the left we see the second version of the khaki toetoep with turn-down collar. In the middle, the white toetoep. On the right, the first version of the khaki toetoep with the standing collar. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and if you have any tips, questions, suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. Till next time.